The 2007 Chinese Grand Prix is underway at a sodden Shanghai International Circuit, and from pole position Raikkonen has lost the lead to Juan Pablo Montoya at the start, although they are side by side going through the first corner, as are the two Williamses. It's all the way side by side, and Barrichello tucks in behind Felipe Massa. And which of the two McLarens is leading? It is Kimi Raikkonen. He has hung on to the lead as we go through the tight turn 3 through the kink at turn 4, which is pretty much flat out. Now then, Montoya is trying to get side by side with Raikkonen, going out into turn 5, the kink, and then heavy braking into turn 6. Be careful you don't lock your brakes because it is wet, and if you do lock your brakes, you're probably going to lose a lot of grip. So rounding through turn 6, a lot of curb cutting there from Nico Hülkenberg, I think. We are on board with Fernando Alonso, started down in 10th position, not a great qualifying for himself. There are yellow flags, so somebody's had an incident at the turn 6 tight corner. Now who's dropping down the order? It looks like Rosberg and Kubica, possibly. Rosberg already out of the race with a crash. A collision, probably. So somebody's collided with somebody. There is the stranded Toro Rosso. He's missing a rear wheel and a front wing. So let's try and work that one out. Somebody might have hit him up the back and then prompted him to shunt into somebody from behind. We're going to see a replay of this. So let's... Oh, big pile-up. So who started this? Renault, Spikers... Well, Renault has lost 2 wings, that's Kubica with no front and rear wing, and Ricciardo's lost his front wing as well. So a massive pile-up at turn 6. So that's bad news for both Renaults and the Toro Rosso of Rosberg. Even worse news because he has no rear wheel, as he's being slowly trudged off the circuit. And you can see the rain still falling down at Shanghai. Started wet, probably going to expect a wet race all around. And up the front we've got Montoya versus Raikkonen. That's position swapping, and there's a bit of tagging at the tight hairpin. Looked like both Toyotas were involved, and there's Sato in there as well. Into the final corner. That's Button ahead of Sato, and behind Sato is his championship rival Mark Webber. So just one on the championship battle between Sato and Webber. Basically, Webber won the last race at Fuji, with Sato holding on to second ahead of Kimi Raikkonen. There's a Super Aguri making the move on Fernando Alonso going into the first few corners. And just behind you can see a Ferrari getting involved in there. But Webber won the race and has chopped the championship lead between himself and Sato. The gap now 20 points, but if Sato finishes second in the last 2 races, he's got it. Otherwise, Webber needs to do something about these final 2 races if he's to stand any chance of a championship, which is now a 2-horse race between those two. Everybody from Jenson Button, Montoya, Alonso, Raikkonen and Rubens Barrichello. Well, Raikkonen wasn't in the championship challenge anyway from the last race, but Barrichello was, and poor races for most of those means that the championship can now only be won between Sato and Webber. Similarly, in the Constructors' Championship, that is now a battle between the Toyota and McLaren teams. But the advantage is with Toyota, although at this moment, Toyota, you can see in front of Rubens Barrichello, running a bit wide, going into turn number 11, I believe. Yeah, I think it is turn 11. So that's exiting turn 13 onto the back straight. You can see the 2 McLarens with Felipe Massa in 3rd position. And behind Massa is Jenson Button, but Jenson Button looking to make a move on Massa going into the final hairpin. It's very tight here. There might be contact with another driver if he's not careful. There is a bit of contact with Felipe Massa, and that's cost Massa dearly because he's sort of struggling on the low grip curb. And now he's got a Ferrari to deal with. The Ferrari's already got ahead. That's Sebastian Vettel making gains. That's up to 7th position. As Mark Webber sets the fastest lap of the race, as he tries to pursue the field in front of him. We're looking at Nick Heidfeld having a look at one of these Super Aguris, just trying to see from the timing screens. It is Nico Hülkenberg in 9th position. Alonso's dropped a position to Heidfeld, interestingly, so looks as if Fernando isn't fully comfortable in the wet conditions at the moment. You can see on the left-hand side we've got both McLarens holding station in 1st and 2nd. Jenson Button gaining a position, Sato gaining 2, Webber gaining 2 as well. And both Williams is dropping down positions. Barrichello was 5th on the grid, down to 6th. Massa was 3rd on the grid and has dropped down to 7th position. Nico Hülkenberg up 3, the star of Fuji last time out. He was 13th on the grid but finished 6th after a 3-stop strategy, which worked out quite well for him. So good drive from Nico Hülkenberg. As we have a look at this spiker rounding the midsection of the lap. Now we switch to the 2 McLarens, who might well be going into combat onto the back straight. Suttil being tagged, was he, by Jarno Trulli going into that turn 11 corner? See if that lost him some positions on the timing screen. Looks as if he's okay for now. Yep, Suttil holding on to 13th from Jarno Trulli. And Takuma Sato versus Mark Webber. That's championship battle going down the back straight. And Sato going round the outside at the hairpin. That's a good move if he pulls that one off. And we switch to Lewis Hamilton, looking at a bit of minor chaos in front of him. There was some side-by-side action between, I think it was Hülkenberg, possibly Heidfeld. 2 Germans battling for that 9th position as Kimi Räikkönen sets the fastest lap. And Webber did hold on to 4th place ahead of Takuma Sato as we start lap 4. There's Jenson Button, has helped Toyota tremendously to get themselves a very comfortable lead of nearly 60 points. It's 58 to be exact over McLaren. And as Honda are more than 86 points behind Toyota in the championship, they cannot win the Constructors' Championship. So it is between Toyota and McLaren. So we switch to a different Japanese team that's on board the Super Aguri of Nico Hülkenberg as he chases Sebastian Vettel, who sits in 8th position and didn't have a particularly good time last time out in Fuji. He was running quite well for a little bit, but then got tagged by Daniel Ricciardo going into the tight Fuji chicane. And then that caused Jenson Button to hit Sebastian Vettel. The 2 McLarens about to go into battle into turn 11. And is that Räikkönen just about hanging on ahead of Montoya? But this is going to bring Jenson Button into play as we exit the 12 and 13 complex. Mark Webber struggling for turn-in. That's the 12 apex, and now he goes through 13. Long right, which should have some camber to it. Onto the long back straight. Now, what's going on in front? Because there could be a 3-way battle between the 2 McLarens and Jenson Button going into the hairpin. And the 2 Williams are about to go into combat, going into the tight 14 hairpin. And there's Fernando Alonso having a big lock-up, just about getting his car slowed down, but that'll cost him a bit of time, and it won't help him try and regain that position from Nick Heidfeld. And you can see in front Sebastian Vettel looks as if he's holding up the field a little bit as Jenson Button sets a fastest lap of the race, closing in on the 2 McLarens. And look at Hülkenberg swarming all over the back of Vettel. He wants to get 8th place off of the German, his fellow German, but driving for an Italian team. And Ferrari do sound like they could do with some points because, again, a missed opportunity. Both Vettel and Trulli getting involved in collisions with other drivers. Trulli's, well, it was his own mistake at the exit of the tight chicane and then spinning into the path of Lewis Hamilton. I suspect if you saw what Hamilton did to Matthias Lauda at Spa, then that's a bit of payback as Perez gets wide onto the curb and loses a place to one of the Renaults. How's Perez ended that far down the order? He's had a bit of a shocker so far, unless he's one who's had to make a pit stop for new body parts. Yes, he is, shown as having made a pit stop. So the 2 Renaults, Rosberg and Perez, all with damage on the first lap, but Rosberg's proving terminal. So onto the back straight once again, the 2 McLarens, and Montoya looks quite close to Räikkönen this time around. These 2 need to work together if they're to overhaul some of the points deficit to Toyota, as Wirtz and Glock are about to go into combat into turn 11. And Montoya versus Räikkönen at the hairpin. Let's have a look at that. Whoa, look at that, because Montoya tried to have a look at Räikkönen, but Kimi holding on. It's into the final corner come the two McLarens, and that was Heidfeld receiving a bit of a tap from Fernando Alonso, and he's lost a position to the Red Bull driver. Now he's coming under pressure from one of the spikers. It's Adrian Sutil, who has overtaken Hamilton on this lap, and he's looking to gain some more positions. Once again, German versus German. Into turn 1 they go. Heidfeld choosing the middle line, which theoretically would offer more grip than the racing line, but the track is so sodden, anywhere is not a particularly grippy place. Top 3 very close together. Looks like some flash of lights there. Could well be the spray graphics, as Sutil now has Lewis Hamilton all over the back of him. And this battle may continue for a little bit. Again, these two used to be best mates. We saw Hamilton and Rosberg nearly go into battle at Fuji, former best mates. Now Sutil and Hamilton also used to be good friends. Wirtz versus Glock for 17th position. That battle's going to continue for a little bit. Glock not having a good time in qualifying way down in last. In fact, he's not been qualifying well in general compared to his teammate. Alonso more than having the measure of his German teammate. As we go back on board with the McLaren. And is this Montoya with Jenson Button right behind him? I think it is, through the spray. Into the final hairpin. Montoya choosing the middle line, but trying to semi-attack Raikkonen, but sort of defend from Button at the same time. And speaking of defending, here's Vettel about to lose a place to Nico Hülkenberg, and I think he's got that one stuck. So Hülkenberg moving up a position at the expense of the Ferrari driver. And that's Sutil losing a place to Hamilton. Sutil, very bad exit out of the hairpin, just getting his wheels onto the slippery curbs, and the slippery curbs are not the quick ones, is not the quickest way to go, and Sutil losing another position to Jarno Trulli. So poor lap for Adrian Sutil as we look back at the two McLarens and the Toyota, and I think Mark Webber is starting to catch up to those three, as Adrian Sutil grapples with quite a lot of turning understeer into the first corner. So he's struggling a little bit out there. You can see the many groove patterns on his tyres running full wets. I suspect the whole field are at this stage. You can see the sheen on the circuit. Means that there's a lot of water out there and not a lot of grip. So you need a lot of tread on the tyres to clear the standing water. That's a bit of a wide line there for Montoya going through turn number 8. Now into 9 and 10, the double left. There you can see Raikkonen, there you can see Montoya, and just behind Montoya is Jenson Button. And coming into play, there's Webber, there's Sato, and the two Williamses. So the top 7 running quite close together. And further down the order, we can see Timo Glock has moved up a position at 17th place for the Red Bull driver at the expense of Wirtz, and there's contact between Vettel and Hülkenberg. So while Hülkenberg looked as if he had made the overtake stick on the previous lap, somehow Vettel got back in front. I suspect Vettel has taken the more grippy outside line at the final hairpin. Turn 14 and then the irrelevant kink of 15. Taking the outside line to retake that position from Hülkenberg. You can see the order remaining the same. There's Rubens Barrichello. He got points last time out at Fuji. He's got Massa around the outside into the final corner. Rubens Barrichello has the inside line though, so he maintains that 6th position, but Felipe trying a cheeky one there on his fellow Brazilian. As Rubens goes into the first corner, turns in fairly smoothly. And now it tightens up into the apex of turn 2. Lauda having a bit of a messy moment on the final corner, and he's lost that position to Christian Albers. That's 15th place for the Dutchman as they start their 8th laps. And behind you can see Toro Rossos. In fact, one of them is a Red Bull. Now that's Timo Glock. And behind is the Toro Rosso of Alexander Wirtz. And just behind you've got Daniel Ricciardo having made a pit stop to replace one of his wings in 19th place, Perez in 20th, and Robert Kubica having replaced both his wings in 21st place. That's going into turn 6. There's a spiker of Albers coming into shot. And in fact, this is Adrian Sutil now we're looking at the back of Jarno Trulli. Going through turns 7 and then 8. Now we switch to turns 11 and 12 because we've got Kimi Räikkönen who's holding up this field. He's not particularly quick at this stage. And on the other side of this straight, there's Robert Kubica. That's coming into the final corner. So Kubica probably will go a lap down in this race. And no doubt with a lot of damage to his car as well, after having to replace both his front and rear wings. Still quite tricky to tell what actually happened on that first lap, but it did look as if the spikers were properly involved in that. Could well have been started by Christian Albers. I seem to recall a yellow T-cam, but we'll move back to the replay and see what happens there. But there's definitely spikers and Renaults involved, as that was Adrian Sutil looking at Trulli. I think Hulkenberg was trying to look on Sebastian Vettel once again, but once again not making that stick. As Felipe Massa sets a new fastest lap, and look at this queue behind Kimi Räikkönen. Something's got to give here. Something has got to give. Someone is going to make a move, and it may well go a bit wrong. You can see Montoya closing in on Räikkönen in the slipstream. You can see spray coming out of the back, particularly on Montoya's car, but the outboard shot, you can see the spray there. You can see the two Williamses at the back. I'm going to drop back a little bit from this top 5. Oh, look at this, Sutil versus Trulli. Trulli made a mistake coming out of 3 and 4, and Sutil has capitalised. So the German driver in the Dutch Spiker team has moved up a position. That's 13th place. As meanwhile at the front, the two McLarens, Kimi Räikkönen moving off the racing line to turn into turn number 11. Looked good in Fuji, did Kimi Räikkönen. He'd led the race for quite a while, but ultimately his 3-stop strategy was not the correct one to go for because it dropped him down from first to second. That was a bit wide coming out of turn number 13, and Montoya is side by side with him going down the back straight. We briefly switched to Adrian Sutil, having a big lock-up at turn 11, but we need to see what's happening at the front because Montoya and Räikkönen are battling for the lead going into the hairpin. You see it changing on the timing screens as Adrian Sutil goes onto the back straight. But who is in the lead? Is it Montoya or is it Räikkönen? It looks as if it is still Kimi Räikkönen, but it's a long... And oh, look at that! Räikkönen spins! Kimi Räikkönen has a spin at the final corner. Now was the contact with another driver, there could well have been. But he rejoins, I think, in 7th position. There's the two Williamses in front. And it looks like the two Williams were about to go into battle going into turn 1. That's a disaster for Räikkönen, having lost the lead. Presumably, somewhere, he's had an incident. But it's now Montoya in the lead of the race. From the two Toyotas, I think it is Webber up in second now, but Jenson Button's having a look round the outside at the Kinker 5. He's got the outside line under braking for turn 6. And I think Jenson Button's going to retake second position. Somewhere on that previous lap, Webber got in front, but Jenson's retaken that initiative. You can see Vettel, that's Hulkenberg versus Alonso, and I think Heidfeld as well, so there's a battle going on there. And I think Alonso's just taken Hulkenberg for 9th position, so that's a move. It's a good move. And off the track, is that Sato pulling out of the race? If it is, that could have huge championship implications. Now, that's highly significant. So, pulling off the circuit, Takuma Sato. He's not going to win the World Championship in this race. Had the chance to do so in Fuji. Did have the chance to do so here, but it's all gone terribly, terribly wrong for the Honda team. Dropping down the order, what has happened to the Honda car? Definitely looks mechanical. It's a suspension problem, so I can't imagine he would have had a collision with Kimi Räikkönen going into the final corner. He'd have been a bit too far back for that, so that is a pure bad luck failure for Takuma Sato. And if it stays like this, where's Webber? He's in 3rd position at the moment. If he finishes 3rd, he will move to within 5 points of Takuma Sato. If he gets ahead of Jenson Button, that will be within 2 points of Takuma Sato, and if he wins, he'll take the championship lead, will Webber, by 5 points. So this has thrown the race and championship wide open. But of course, we've got disruptors in the field, and one of those is the McLaren of Juan Pablo Montoya. The other one for Mark Webber, curiously, is his own teammate in second position. So, if team orders existed, they'd be telling Jensen to move out of the way for Webber. Webber's having a look, but he'd better be careful in the spray. That's moved Kimi Raikkonen back up to 6th position, but that's of little comfort to the Finn, who was leading the early stages of this race. And a suspected collision. Not sure with who, but if he did have a collision with somebody, it would have been his own teammate, or the Toyota of Webber, or even the Toyota of Button. They were all very close together. So here is Mark Webber running in 3rd position. Just behind Webber it's Massa ahead of Rubens Barrichello. 4th and 5th now are the two Williamses. And they've had a tricky period with unreliability and very few points scored. So that would be a good result for the Williams if they stay there, but still a long way to go. 45 or so laps to go of this race. 7th place is... Oh, that's Fernando Alonso's had a bit of an incident with somebody. Was it with Heidfeld or was it with Nico Hülkenberg? Well, behind Alonso, that is Lewis Hamilton. I suspect if there was a collision between anyone and Alonso was involved in it, it probably would have been Heidfeld. Webber's moved up to 2nd. That's important for the championship. Important for the Australians Championship campaign. As into the final corner goes Button. And behind Button, that's Massa. And then Rubens Barrichello behind the Williams of Massa. 2 Williamses, in fact, running 4th and 5th. So, further back we've got Hülkenberg. In fact, it's showing as Hülkenberg having gained a position from Alonso. So I reckon Alonso's had a bit of a collision with Nico Hülkenberg going into turn 11. And as a result dropped a couple of positions, one to Hülkenberg and one to Heidfeld. Further back we've got Lewis Hamilton in 11th position, that's the other Super Aguri, and Adrian Sutil is 12th. Both spikers showing quite well actually. Sutil started 18th and has moved his way through the field to be 12th, and then Christian Albers also not doing too badly. So once again a good race for the two spikers. Showing good race pace. Here's Alonso, who's had a very good season for Red Bull, but ultimately out of the championship challenge, having yet to score a win, but performing very solidly and consistently. Now, what is Jenson Button doing? That is going to make Mark Webber a little bit nervous. As he rounds turn 12, which then morphs into turn 13. Quite an interesting corner with a lot of camber on the inside. I do like a bit of camber. There's your race leader, Juan Pablo Montoya. And just behind we'll be seeing the two Toyotas about to go into battle. This is not what Webber wants. And Matthias Lauda, that's not what he wants. A bit of a double front lockup going into turn 11. But he holds 15th position at the moment. Just behind Christian Albers and just ahead of Timo Glock. Looks as if Button has retaken Mark Webber for 2nd position on the track. So, is the tactic for Toyota to use Button to try and catch Montoya and make the Colombian's life a bit tricky up front? And into the pits. We've got pit stops happening. Kimi Raikkonen's making a pit stop. Is this tyres or is this unscheduled? Well, it certainly was still running up there before making that pit stop. You can see the track starting to change colour a little bit, so I wonder if Kimi Raikkonen is going to make the move on to intermediates. Webber's lost a position to Felipe Massa somewhere, so Felipe Massa's now up to 3rd position on the track. And you can see the track starting to change colour between the shimmering floodedness to something a little bit greyer. As Massa runs a bit wide, he's going to spin. Felipe Massa has a big spin at the exit of turn 7. Now, can he rejoin quickly before others come into view? He's making a bit of a hash of that one, but he's just about okay. Rejoining ahead of Sebastian Vettel, who's going to come into play. Can he make a move going to turn 9? No, he can't. He's not close enough. So there's Vettel, and there behind is Hülkenberg. Mark Webber back up to 3rd now, but now he's got Rubens Barrichello all over the back of him. So Webber's race not going as smooth as he hoped. And You can see the track is starting to dry out a little bit. Still some places where the water's a bit much. But maybe that's why Raikkonen's come into the pits. He fancies some intermediate tyres. And Rubens Barrichello fancies third place from Mark Webber going through the hairpin. Webber's not having any of that round the outside, holding on to that position. Now let's see, what are the front runners going to do? There's Jenson Button, getting it a little bit wrong at the final corner, getting it very wrong at the final corner, and Mark Webber's going to retake that second position. That's important for the Australian. And Rubens Barrichello has taken third position, so a fairly sizable error for Jenson Button coming out of the final corner. As we hit 1/4 distance, lap 14, it is still Montoya leading the race, but the gap is 6 seconds between himself and Martin Webber, so Montoya proving to be a very valuable disruptor in the championship battle between Sato and Webber. Montoya just fancies a race win, why not? And Rubens Barrichello having a look at Martin Webber, but the door getting shut. And Webber holding on to that second position. Here's Montoya going through the fast stuff now. That's 7, and here's 8. And turning in nicely. The McLaren working quite well in these wet conditions with the Pirelli tyres. Rubens Barrichello turning in doesn't look quite as smooth in the Williams. You can see them turning understeer through 9 and then the kink of 10. They use the AstroTurf at the exit and the cars seem to like it. For some reason, wet AstroTurf offers quite a bit of grip compared to wet tarmac. So, coming round the final couple of banked corners before the back straight. This long back straight of roughly 1,300 metres. I do like the long straights. Well, Herman Tilke does anyway. For me, the long straight needs a bunch of trees either side, a big ribbon of trees. And then a heavy braking zone into a chicane, followed by a long straight. Let's get back to the action because Jenson Button versus Rubens Barrichello at the hairpin. This is Sebastian Vettel now on the Bridgestone tyres, which seem to be working fairly well in these wet conditions. I think Vettel might well have had Hulkenberg challenging for position. Is Hulkenberg ahead at last? Well, there is Kimi Raikkonen. Let's have a look at the grooves on his tyres. See if they are full wets or see if they are intermediates. Because he's rounding the final sequence into the long back straight. And you can see he's trying to catch up to the Toro Rosso of Wirtz. Just looking down the order. That's Trulli having a bit of an off-track moment. He lost a position to Albers. Is he going to lose another one? This time to Matthias Lauda? Indeed he is. So Matthias Lauda gaining a position at the expense of a recovering Trulli. And Button is ahead of Barrichello once again, so that battle going into the hairpin has been settled in favour of the Brit. And just seeing some of the battles, there was Hulkenberg versus Vettel as well. I wonder who won out between those two. Just having a look, it's Hulkenberg. So Hulkenberg is now ahead of Vettel, and once again showing very well in the Super Aguri. He's gone from 12th on the grid to run 6th at 1/4 distance. That's Christian Albers we're looking at, who's running in 12th position. Good showing, from 19th on the grid up to 12th, and his teammate equally as good, from 18th on the grid to 11th. So Spikers could be on for some points, and that was Alonso tagging the back of Nick Heidfeld going into the turn 11 corner, and that was a very, very rude way to take 8th position off of the German. Not clean, but just as effective, I suppose. So Alonso moves up to 8th at the expense of Heidfeld. That's Lauda versus Trulli, having having pretty much a similar incident as Alonso and Heidfeld had, going through turn 11, and Trulli regaining that position from the Austrian. And just having a look, pit stops are taking place. Montoya, Button and Barrichello are all in the pits. Now is this tyres, or is this a scheduled stop for some fuel? I suppose we'll be finding out soon, as Matt Webber takes the lead of the race. So, can he use his lower fuel load to make an impact into the race lead? Or have the others gone into intermediate tyres and are making use out of those? It's going to be interesting to find out. But turning through turn 6 now is the new race leader, Mark Webber. He's got Felipe Massa behind him. It was 9.5 seconds as he started the lap. It's now 9.6, so Mark Webber just eking out the gap between himself and Felipe Massa. There is the Brazilian who came back into the GP4 series after the old team boss, Sutsen, Alexei Korobov, chose to get rid of Jose Maria Lopez in favour of Massa. That was after the Canadian Grand Prix, and then Massa went on to win on his comeback at Indianapolis, so that was a very impressive performance from the Brazilian. Since then, Williams have been taken over by a new team boss, a guy called Andy, so we welcome him into the community. A belated welcome from myself, but a welcome nonetheless. On board with Mark Webber, you can see Lauda dropping down the order. I wonder if he's made a pit stop. Wirtz has made a pit stop as well, and I imagine Lauda has done the same as well. So there's third place now, Nico Hülkenberg, still on his original fuel load, and just behind is Sebastian Vettel. And behind Vettel is Fernando Alonso, and behind Fernando Alonso is Nick Heidfeld. So, coming into the final corner, what are these drivers going to do? Webber's into the pits, and so is Nico Hülkenberg. So now pit stops are taking place. Fuel on fuel, or fuel and tyres, or fuel and intermediates. Definitely for fuel anyway. There's your new race leader, Felipe Massa. There's Christian Albers in 8th place, getting it very sideways at the entry to the final corner and running onto the wet AstroTurf. Definitely not as much grip on that particular AstroTurf compared to turn 10. And Albers lost that position to, I think that was Juan Pablo Montoya. Raikkonen's way down the order in 14th place, but pit stops are going on. That's Vettel versus Alonso. That's for second position now. Going through turn 6. Timo Glock makes a pit stop, as does Daniel Ricciardo. So Ricciardo, having made that unscheduled pit stop at the very beginning of the race, is back into the pits for a scheduled one this time. So rounding turns 9 and 10. Watch how they use the AstroTurf at the exit of the 10 kink. Nearly all 4 wheels off the circuit there. Now into turn number 11, it's a tricky braking zone into a tricky sequence. And that's Sergio Perez getting a monster run coming out of turn 4. That's taking a position off of Adrian Sutil, the 14th position. So Sutil has made a pit stop. Perez still pretty much on his original fuel load, although he was one of the other drivers to have made an unscheduled stop at the end of the first lap to repair some damage. So let's see, brake hard for the final hairpin around the 100 metre board. Alonso spots that nicely, also spots the apex quite nicely as well, as he goes into the straight that leads into the final corner. That's Vettel in the lead. I think Vettel's carrying on for another lap, but Alonso's not. He's into the pits, and Massa is also into the pits, and setting a new fastest lap in the process. That is a bold move from Christian Albers on Juan Pablo Montoya, but not making that one stick. Alonso's into the pits as well. Now, Massa setting a new fastest lap's quite interesting actually, because it shows that the full wet tyres are still the one to go for, and as the fuel load is lessened, it means that the less fuel they have, the quicker you're going, because you've got that much lighter car. So Massa could make a big impact into this race if things go well for him. There's Sergio Perez. That's not Sergio Perez, that is Nick Heidfeld in 3rd position. Timo Glock versus one of the Renaults now, going down the back straight. That's versus Kubica, with what probably is a very unbalanced car with new wings. Switch to Heidfeld as he hits the apex quite well at turn number 8. Now into turn number 9, turns in. That's quite smooth at the wheel. Heidfeld looking fairly comfortable in 3rd position at the moment, yet to make his first pit stop. Kubica did take that position from Timo Glock in the end as Sergio Perez. That's out of the race, goes Sergio Perez. That's yet another retirement for the Mexican driver. He retired with a collision with Felipe Massa last time out at Fuji. And during that long turn 4 took them both out of the race. This one looks more mechanical, and in fact it's an engine failure pretty much. It says water leak, but we call that engine failure in this world. Now let's keep an eye out on the gaps between Massa and Montoya, because 27 seconds is the gap between Massa and Montoya at the moment, and pit stops usually take between 25 and 30 seconds. So that's going to be interesting to see if Massa can jump Montoya for the race lead, as Heidfeld comes into the pits from 3rd. And speaking of Massa, he just set another new fastest lap. There is the Brazilian on his way, not into the pits just yet, so he can definitely score big in this race if he times his first pit stop well. And with Sebastian Vettel in 2nd position, and Hamilton 3rd now, Montoya's 4th, so he's the first of the drivers who has stopped. Trulli 5th. He's not stopped, Button has. So Jenson Button has jumped Mark Webber somewhere on the pit stop sequence. And that won't do Mark Webber's championship challenge much good. Here's Sebastian Vettel going through turn 7. Hits the apex so well he actually uses a little bit of curb as he rounds the next few corners. Here's turn 9 and 10. You can see some lorries in the background advertising Zytec. I don't think they supply anybody, so that must be a support series. Switching back to Felipe Massa now, as you can see more shakers in the order. You can see Albers and Kubica dropping down the order, I assume from pit stops. Albers must have made a pit stop because he was running quite well up earlier on. And I think Kubica was making a pit stop as well. So we should be expecting Massa, Hamilton and Vettel into the pits soon, as Jarno Trulli in 5th position, also expected into the pits pretty soon. Once again, it looks as if 2-stop strategies are the order of the day. But we did see a good mixture at Fuji last time, and it produced some interesting running orders and some interesting battles in the closing stages, particularly with Adrian Sutil, who'd used a one-stop strategy to gain track position over other drivers, but ultimately his tyres were a bit too worn out. So that was Jenson Button making a move on Jarno Trulli, but I don't think he's made that one stick. Will still gain a position because someone has just made a pit stop. I think it was Lewis Hamilton. As you can see, it's Vettel into the pits actually, because we can see Lewis Hamilton there in 2nd position now. And let's see how far Vettel will drop down the order. Where will he rejoin? Target to get back ahead out of Nick Heidfeld. Maybe even Kimi Räikkönen. Räikkönen's not shown good pace since his pit stop. He's dropped down the order. And in fact, Vettel has jumped Kimi Räikkönen. So Räikkönen's race not going very well at the moment. That's Massa ahead of one of the lapped Renaults. Must be Kubica, I think, because he's running last. Let's keep an eye out on the T-cam and helmet. Yeah, it looks like Kubica's helmet. So Massa's put a lap on Kubica, but Massa has got a pit stop to make, as has Lewis Hamilton. I think Heidfeld jumped Alonso in the pit stop sequence as well, so whereas Alonso barged his way past Heidfeld earlier on, Heidfeld's got his own back by making a decent pit stop. There we have a look at Montoya running in 3rd position but having stopped. Now it'd be very important to see when Massa makes his pit stop if he can rejoin ahead of Montoya. That's the key question for this race now. I imagine they're all still on full wet tyres, so all stops you've seen have been fuel related, but with the added bonus of putting some new tyres on. Coming round the final corner, that's 2nd place Lewis Hamilton we're looking at. It's quite lonely there in 2nd, there's nobody in front or behind him, and Massa's in the pits, so Lewis Hamilton briefly takes the lead of the race. As we look at Kimi Räikkönen making a move on Sebastian Vettel going into the final hairpin. And can he make that one stick? He's taking it very tentatively at the apex, but he's got that position stuck. So Kimi Räikkönen, trying to begin his recovery drive, is now up to 8th position. Could be 7th once Trulli makes his pit stop, which he is doing now. as coming out of the final corner. That was Nico Hülkenberg as Jenson Button versus, I think that was Rubens Barrichello. Was it Felipe Massa? I think it was actually Felipe Massa. So Massa's rejoined from his pit stop in the mix, and he has jumped Mark Webber, which is interesting. So Trulli dropping down the orders, lost the position to the Spiker of Suttil. There he comes out of the pits, on board with Christian Albers we were. So Trulli has regained a position at the expense of Christian Albers, thanks to making a later pit stop. But there you can see Jenson Button in what should be a net second place once Hamilton makes his pit stop. There's Felipe Massa behind him, and in front of Button, just turning into turn 11, that was Juan Pablo Montoya, now in second position, but it will be a net lead once Lewis Hamilton makes his first pit stop of the race. The gap between Hamilton and Montoya is 14.4 seconds, so Hamilton definitely won't maintain the lead of the race, or something like that. But he should be in the mix. He's been driving quite well on the longer fuel load. So Montoya brakes hard for the final hairpin, hits the apex quite well, doesn't run onto the slippery curb on the outside, and currently running in second. I think Hamilton's continued for another lap. Indeed he has. What's the gap between Hamilton and Montoya? It's 14.4 seconds. Wait until they cross the line. Still 14.4 seconds, so the gap remaining static at the moment as Rubens Barrichello runs the AstroTurf at the exit of turn 16, but it's okay at the moment. He didn't run too wide. As long as you can keep two wheels on the circuit, then you're probably okay. So coming into turn 6 now is Montoya as he crosses the first sector points. The gap between himself and Button is 5 seconds exactly, pretty much. So if Button's going to win this race, he needs to run longer on his fuel strategy compared to Juan Pablo Montoya. Speaking of which, he's about to enter turns 9 and 10. That's 9. Run the curb a little bit into 10. Don't run the curb, but then run the curb on the exit, and it's okay. So turning into turn 11 now, brake at the about somewhere between the 150 metre boards. Keep it tight for turn 11 into turn 12, and then you can run the car on the exit, and then just accelerate onto this long straight. So lap 22 now, and we are looking at the race leader Lewis Hamilton rounding the turn 14 hairpin. There's a small kink in there of 15. Is he going to continue for another lap, or is he going to come into the pits? He's going to continue for another lap, so Hamilton just racking up the laps at the front before his first pit stop, which should probably see him rejoin probably 8th place behind Sebastian Vettel if things go well. What we're looking at here, Hülkenberg in 11th position. There's Fernando Alonso about to go into round 2 with Nick Heidfeld. That's coming down the back straight. Is Alonso, he's thinking about making a move on Nick Heidfeld going into the final hairpin. Don't think he's close enough at this stage. Indeed he isn't. And at the moment Alonso is 10th. So Hamilton into turn 6 now. Gap's 14.2 seconds between himself and Montoya. And Jenson Button is 3/10 quicker on that previous lap at this stage. Off the circuit goes Hülkenberg. That's a very slow traction zone. I think Trulli and Albers are doing battle for 13th as well, just seeing a bit of a swap going on between those two. As Hülkenberg turns into turns 1 and then turn 2, having recovered from his minor excursion at the exit of the final corner. Meanwhile, going into what looks like turn 11, yep, and it's Lewis Hamilton going through turn 12 now. You can see still running those full wet tyres. And if you're getting on board with one of the other drivers who have made a pit stop, you should probably see full wets on those as well. Jenson Button about to turn in. Indeed he goes. There's Massa turning in. There's Webber, championship contender, and if he makes some moves into Massa and Button, has a very good chance of being has a very good chance of closing a gap between himself and Sato, and with Sato out of the race dramatically, Webber needs to maximise as many points as he can get. That's Timo Glock we're on board with now, going into turn 6. Mullering the curbs on the inside, as was the driver in front. Who is that in front? Let's try and find out. 16th place is Daniel Ricciardo for the Renault. And Renault's not having a good race because of their first lap calamity. And that's quite significant actually. They're only 7 points ahead of Super Aguri in the Constructors' Championship. And if Super Aguri get a good result out of this, then they could jump Renault, because Hulkenberg's up there, Hamilton's doing a good job out of the front. So this is a good opportunity for Super Aguri. As rounding the complex of 7, 8, 9, 10 go Hamilton, and into the hairpin goes Christian Albers. That's Heidfeld running a bit wide into turns 1 and then morphs into 2. Can Alonso get up the inside up into 2? He's having a think about it, but he's been a bit tentative. Now the side-by-side going through 3 and 4, and Alonso's taken that position. So he's... Although I said he looked a bit tentative, his tentative was good, because he's now up to 9th place. And the next one to watch out for is Hulkenberg, although Hulkenberg has dropped back from the Alonso-Heidfeld scrap. And in fact, Alonso overtook Heidfeld cleanly this time. And it's still Hamilton leading out the front on lap 24 as Webber gets it all out of shape going into turn 11. Has got Rubens Barrichello behind him, so he's got a reason for going out of shape. He needs to push hard to stay ahead of Barrichello. Further back, Raikkonen's on his own out now in 7th position as Timo Glock comes into the pits for a pit stop. Why else would you go into the pits? But that's quite early for Timo Glock, and I think I can only assume that he's had some sort of mechanical issue. Let's see how many stops he's actually made. So Kubica's made 2. How many has Glock made? It will update itself. I think he has gone a lap down now on new field. It's the first couple of corners. See how the car goes wide at the exit of turn 1, and then to try and get as wide a line as possible into turn 2. Then they stay in the middle and then tuck into the inside for 3, and then sweep to the outside for 4. And we can use a bit of curb in the dry, although we'll probably be avoiding it in the wet. And now braking hard for turn 6. Now we switch to Lewis Hamilton, who's still leading the race, lap 25. And yeah, it's showing Glock as having made 2 pit stops, so I can only assume that was an unscheduled one for the German, the very unfortunate German who needs a morale boost. There is Glock actually, who is a lap down on Lewis Hamilton. It'll regain that lap once Lewis makes a pit stop. And the gap is coming down between Hamilton and Montoya, 13.8 seconds as they cross the first sector point. And it'll probably be a little bit less once they cross the second sector point. Jenson Button gaining a tenth and a bit over Felipe Massa. And exiting turn 13 onto the long back straight. Nobody in front, nobody behind. It's a very relaxing place to be. Underneath the Petronas Bridge. And we switch to Montoya, braking hard for the hairpin. But not too hard because it's easy to lock up in these wet conditions. And Montoya, once again, could well be leading the race, but Hamilton going very, very long in his first stint, so I wonder if Hamilton is taking the Montoya strategy from Fuji and is only planning to stop the once. We'll find out, I suppose. Got a few more laps before half distance, 2 more to be exact. And there he is, still out the front, Lewis Hamilton leading the race. Looking in that right-hand mirror, Jarno Trulli has got Christian Albers all over the back of him as they go into the back straight. Keep an eye out for the spiker in case he juts out from the slipstream, but the Ferrari car is a very quick car in a straight line. There he goes, Christian Albers is trying to get up the inside of Jarno Trulli going into the final hairpin. Can Trulli hang on round the outside? It's shown that the outside line can work, and I think he was doing that. As we switch now, that's Sebastian Vettel in 8th position. Looked as if he was a bit wide going through 2, but he might well have recovered it going through 3. Now through the kink of 5 before the braking zone of 6, and Vettel running in 8th position. That'll be useful points for the Ferrari team in their battle for 8th in the championship against BMW Sauber, who have one driver out, as Sergio Perez had an engine failure. Heidfeld is running in 8th and could be a threat in case something happens somewhere up the front. But the good news for Vettel is that Fernando Alonso has pulled away quite a bit over Nick Heidfeld. The gap is 7 seconds between the two. As we look at Timo Glock going in through the final corner, and once again Hamilton continues for another lap. He may well be one stopping in this race, one of, well, possibly the only driver who might be one stopping. As through the complex goes Matthias Lauda, running in 15th position in between Christian Albers and Daniel Ricciardo. Lauda started 20th, so it's been an okay drive from him to get up to 15th. And there's Montoya in 2nd position, but if Hamilton's one stopping, Montoya kind of needs to get a move on. And it's 13.3 seconds behind, so he needs to push a little bit. Button's in 3rd, Webber's 4th. And he's still got Rubens Barrichello quite close to him, just half a second behind. So that battle's going to carry on for a little bit. And Button gaining a 10th or so at the first sector out of Juan Pablo Montoya. And Montoya gained quite a lot of time over Hamilton in that first sector. It was about 7 tenths. As way off the track goes Christian Albers in his pursuit of Jarno Trulli. He's pushed it a bit too hard, and now he's rejoined. Having kept his 14th position, but will make his job of trying to gain 13th all that more difficult. And Montoya is getting a move on now. I think he's just heard what I've been saying about him. He's 3 tenths quicker than Hamilton going through that middle sector. And now coming through the banked turn 13 onto the back straight once again. On board with Jenson Button, is just 2.9 seconds behind Montoya. And Webber's dropped back quite a bit. He's 9.5 seconds behind Button now. So team orders probably wouldn't have worked out if they had used them. In fact, here's Alonso and Heidfeld, and just looking at that, Heidfeld, well, I don't think he was 6 seconds behind Alonso because that looks a lot closer. As, whoa, 5th position, Barrichello having a look at Mark Webber for 4th position going into the final hairpin. And not making that one work just yet. Now into the final corner. The battle for 4th as we go into half distance. Montoya now 12.1 seconds behind Hamilton, so quite a bit quicker than the Brit on that last lap. And he needs to be, because we are now at half distance, and I am fairly certain that Hamilton is one stopping in this race. So he's looking good, is Lewis. And that will certainly help Super Aguri in their battle against Renault in the championship. We're looking at Jenson Button going through the middle sector. That's turn 7 he's going through now. That's where Massa had his spin earlier on, but it didn't seem to harm him too much as he'd managed to regain quite a bit of his position. Although he does sit in 6th place now. That's Timo Glock making an absolute... well, he's ruined Montoya's exit out of turn 10, and that's Jenson Button making a move on Montoya. So Jenson Button takes a position, and it will be a net lead once Hamilton makes his pit stop, but that was caused by Timo Glock being an absolute pain in the arse for Montoya, going through turns 9 and 10. So rounding 13 and onto the back straight once again. And of course they've got to lap Glock. That's Kubica versus Wirtz going through the final corners. And that's a battle for 17th position between the two. The Austrian versus the Pole. So Montoya now down to 3rd position is going to be a bit seething about that one, because He'd lost second position through no fault of his own. Mark Webber versus Rubens Barrichello into the final hairpin. It's kicking off. Off goes Webber. And now the two Williams are going into battle. And Mark Webber has lost 2 positions. And that's not going to do his championship challenge much good. And now Felipe Massa's going to try and take advantage of Rubens Barrichello. Getting it a bit cheeky with Mark Webber going into the final corner. And it's cost the Australian, but it's still Rubens Barrichello ahead. So he is now up to 4th position. Massa's up to 5th. Montoya down to 6th, and he's got his own teammate. And in fact, Webber down to 6th, and he's got his own Kimi Räikkönen challenging as well. And that's Timo Glock finally getting out of the way. First to Jenson Button and now to Montoya. And no doubt there'll be a certain finger being waved by Montoya somewhere in the middle. On board with Wirtz as he moves to the inside line. Is that contact with Kubica? Could well have been. In fact, there is Kubica on the outside. I suspect Kubica's had a go and he's just nudged the Austrian offline. And he's going to try and get him round the outside of 13. They're side by side for quite a while, but Kubica takes that position off of him. Now Montoya's going to try and retake second off of Jenson Button somehow. Needs to close in a little bit if he's going to make an overtake work. And Wirtz having a think about a dive bomb on Kubica going into the final hairpin, so that battle wasn't quite done yet. Looks to be now, because Kubica is pulling away inexorably from Wirtz as we go through the final corner. So let's recap it. It's still Lewis Hamilton in the lead. There he is, in fact. He's about to put a lap on Wirtz and eventually Kubica. Felipe Massa's having a look at Rubens Barrichello into the hairpin. And Rubens Barrichello does the outside trick and stays ahead of his younger Brazilian friend. Fellow Paulista. And Montoya. Now we switch back to Wirtz, who's going to go a lap down on Hamilton. Moves out of the way in good timing as Kimi Räikkönen makes a pit stop from 7th position. So is that Kimi Räikkönen once again on a 3-stop strategy and once again not working out? Or is this something else? Could be tyres, but I suspect it could well be another 3-stop strategy that's not going to work out for him. Look at this, 2 Williams still battling with each other. It's side by side through 5. And is Massa on the outside line? Is he going to get ahead in the braking? Not quite, but Barrichello clunks the curb a little bit. He stays ahead. But it's clear that Massa's the quicker driver of the two at the moment. He's trying round the outside at 7. That would be a good move to pull off, but Rubens Barrichello stays the inside line. Now got track position into turn 8. And through 9 and 10. Barrichello versus Massa, but it definitely looks like Massa's the quicker of the two drivers at the moment. You can see Massa did actually briefly get ahead, but Barrichello's retaken that initiative as we see Hulkenberg going through at 7, chasing Nick Heidfeld for 9th position now, both having gained a place due to Räikkönen's second pit stop. And now through 9 and 10 go the two Germans as Hamilton comes into the pits for what must be his only stop. So Lewis Hamilton will lose the lead to Jenson Button, who goes into the final corner. And there goes Jenson into the lead of the race. And sets a new fastest lap in the process. So he's getting the message now. If Hamilton is one stopping, Jenson needs to push, and now's the time to do it. Montoya also needs to push, but they all need to push. Because who knows, if the track dries out, it could be switching to intermediates. But looking at the conditions, it still looks very grey and it still looks pretty wet out there, so I think full wets are still the order of the day for all the drivers. That's Montoya, who's now in 2nd position. And not far behind Jenson Button either, so rounding 6. And here the two Williams, they're about to go into battle again. Through turn 6, mullering the curbs once again. You can see the grandstands, nicely filled with people on the left. As Barrichello and Massa go through turn 7. As we switch to Timo Glock, who is not in this race at all. Going through turns 9 and 10. Behind Montoya, but a lap down. And the two Williams behind him. They're the next ones to lap Timo Glock. As the German rounds. Oh, and Barrichello versus Massa once again. And behind is Mark Webber looking to exact revenge on both of these two. Particularly Rubens Barrichello for nudging him at the hairpin a few laps ago and causing the Australian to lose a couple of positions. You can see not a lot from the back of the car, but you can just about see Massa making a move on Rubens Barrichello. Going down the back straight, is he going to make that one stick, or is Barrichello going to hang on round the outside? Well, we're looking at Jenson Button crossing the line to start another lap. That's Mark Webber still showing his 5th position, and Barrichello still showing his 3rd position. So Barrichello hanging on once again, but once again Massa is showing to be the quicker driver of the two at this stage of the race. As they start another lap, so it's going to be contact between the two. Heidfeld versus Hulkenberg. Heidfeld just about hanging on. That got a little bit hairy. And just 2 and a bit seconds in front of these two are Fernando Alonso, running in 8th position. You'd expect him to pull away, but he's not doing so. And looking further back, Albers has dropped a couple of positions. Oh, that's why. He's had a bit of a calamity somewhere. Is that a mechanical problem, or has he spun off very wildly at the exit of 13? I suspect it's more mechanical. Let's see what happens as it comes up. It's a suspension problem, so yeah, that will have pitched him off the circuit at turn 13. And you can see a wheel rolling down. Hopefully it won't cross the circuit. Did see a couple of incidents at Spa where drivers ran into other wheels, particularly at the later stages of the race, although they did get away without damage. But yeah, it can happen, and the wheel has been retrieved. So as Albers gets craned away, it is Jenson Button who leads by 3.2 seconds from Juan Pablo Montoya. Then the raging battle, there it goes, between the two Williamses and Mark Webber. That's for 3rd position. 6th is Lewis Hamilton, so rejoined ahead of Vettel. That's a good effort. Vettel 7th, Alonso 8th, Heidfeld 9th and Hulkenberg 10th. But we're going to have a change of the lead because Jenson Button is in the pits and Felipe Massa has finally taken Rubens Barrichello. That's an important move for himself. That was going into the hairpin. Now rounding the final corner. And you can see it's going to be Massa in 2nd position now because somewhere on the right hand side is the stopped Jenson Button as he takes on more fuel and tyres. So Montoya retakes the lead, and we got a South American top 3. That's quite nice to see, actually. Montoya, Massa and Barrichello, 1 Colombian and 2 Brazilians. Mark Webber moves back up to 4th, Hamilton moves up to 5th place now. Now that's significant, Jenson Button's rejoined behind Lewis Hamilton. So once they make their pit stops, we could be seeing Lewis Hamilton take the lead of the race, which would be an incredible achievement for himself and Super Aguri. And especially as Hamilton was 16th on the grid, that's been an unbelievable drive for himself to get up to 5th position. And if he is one stopping, then he could be leading. That could be one of the best wins of the season if it stays like that, but still a long way to go, about 23 laps to go. And Jenson is on fresher tyres compared to Hamilton, but you've seen it can be tricky to overtake. Oh, Heidfeld, is that a problem for Heidfeld? Went off the circuit at 6. Yeah, it looks terminal. Heidfeld out of the race. So that's a shame for BMW Sauber, who've gone unreliable for this race. That moves Hulkenberg up to 9th place. Suttle's up to 10th now for the Spiker. That'll move Kimi Räikkönen up to 11th. Having a dismal race is Räikkönen, but he has made 2 stops. Yellow flags. So Heidfeld stopped out there. There he is. So is that transmission or is that suspension? Because there's no smoke coming out from the back of the car. Transmission, so it's a gearbox problem. So that will help Ferrari maintain their at least 3-point gap over BMW Sauber in the championship. And with Vettel up in 7th place. And but further back, Webber's taken 3rd place off of Rubens Barrichello. Just saw in the background there, Rubens Barrichello made a small mistake coming out of the final corner, and that's put Mark Webber up to 3rd position. That's going to be useful points for himself. Taking out more points over Takuma Sato, who is, of course, not in the race, having retired with a suspension problem. So now can Mark Webber do something about Felipe Massa, because it's been pretty clear that Barrichello has been holding up Massa and Webber. Now they've finally broken free of the Brazilian, of Rubinho. I'm just looking at... off the track goes a McLaren. It's Montoya! Montoya spins off the circuit, so that's a clumsy error. Following Alexander Wirtz, trying to lap him, he's gone offline, and he's had a bit of a spin, so... Well, he's not going to overcut Jenson Button and the pit stop sequence. How much time has that lost him? It's lost him 9 seconds compared to Felipe Massa. So that's put Massa back into play. And I was just about to say before that happened, I was keeping an eye out on Lewis Hamilton and Jenson Button. The gaps between those two is less than a second. So, in fact, it's 0.3 of a second. Jenson Button has probably got the measure of Lewis Hamilton in terms of pace. The question is, can he overtake Hamilton? With 22 laps to go, I suspect he might, but we've seen it can be tricky to overtake. Here's Mark Webber turning into the final corner. And he's got a fairly comfortable buffer over Rubens Barrichello. In fact, that's Button versus Hamilton going through the hairpin. And Button is Hamilton trying to have a go back at Jenson around the outside, but can't make that one stick. So Jenson Button takes that position away from Hamilton, and an important one as well, because both of these are going to the end of the race. Button's got that fresher tyre advantage. We switch to Felipe Massa now in 2nd position. Behind him, that's a lapped runner, probably Timo Glock. Now 6 seconds, it's 4.4 seconds actually, the gap between... That's Massa versus Webber. But about 6 seconds in front of Massa is Montoya, who had that strange spin, having been caught out by the turbulent air and the slippery outside line of turn 10. He's going to regain his rhythm now. On board with Webber, you can clearly see full wets that he is running. So it's clearly too wet to switch to the intermediate tyres. And the rain's going to continue falling for a bit. So I'm expecting full wets until the end of the race. As Kubica, that's not Kubica actually, that is Daniel Ricciardo having a battle with Matthias Lauda for 13th position. And now we switch back to Montoya. That is Massa behind. Now what is the gap between Montoya and Massa? Well, at the moment it's showing the pit stop graphic at the bottom. You can see everyone's made 1 stop, but Button's made 2. Raikkonen's made 2. Ricciardo's made 2. Kubica has also made 2, and Glock has made 2 stops. But Jenson Button's definitely going to the end of the race. A bit unsure about Raikkonen, he may have another pit stop to make, but generally speaking all drivers have got 1 more pit stop to make, except for Button and except for Hamilton. So we've nearly got 20 laps to go now. We are on lap 36. At the moment it is Montoya leading the race from Felipe Massa. Mark Webber 3rd with Rubens Barrichello 4th. Jenson Button in 5th place. He's not exactly pulled away from Hamilton. In fact, the gap is just it's 1.4 seconds now, but yeah, Hamilton was trying to keep him honest for a bit. In fact, Jenson Button taking a very, very wide outside line through turns 1 and 2. Now through turns 3, which will then become turn 4. Where is Hamilton in relation to Button? Because that was very, very wide. Switch to his teammates, but now we switch to the battling Lauda and Ricciardo through the hairpin. The outside line still works, but Ricciardo has got the better traction on the inside, and he's taken that position away from Matthias Lauda. Into the final corner as they start another lap. This will be their 36th lap that will be starting. Give it another few seconds and this man will be starting his 37th lap, and it is Montoya. Once again chasing after Alexander Wirtz, who's proved a bit of a roadblock, as has Timo Glock in this race. Ironic that both have affected Montoya specifically. That's the way it goes. And Massa is 5.1 seconds behind Montoya, so he's closing the gap a little bit more as we go on board with Kimi Räikkönen. Had that incident at the final corner, still unexplained as to who he made contact with, but I'm going to hazard a guess that it was either Montoya or Webber. But Montoya, speaking of which, is in the pits for his second pit stop, so Massa retakes the lead for a little bit as he did during the first stint. But how long before he makes his second stop? So Montoya will probably rejoin somewhere around Hamilton or Vettel. He's already lost the position to Button and Hamilton. Is he going to lose any more? We'll find out shortly as Massa goes into turn 6 as the race leader. Over this driver, Mark Webber, who looks as if Rubens Barrichello's keeping him honest or closing in a bit. And just having a look. Looks like he was leading earlier. It was Montoya. He's rejoined in 8th position behind Vettel. So Montoya's got a bit of work to do. Vettel and Alonso, but ahead of Hülkenberg. So third placed Rubens Barrichello, looking to try and close in on Mark Webber. That's the straight approaching turn 11, and just behind that's Timo Glock. Again, a lap down, and not driving particularly quickly. I think this is just a test session for himself. Rounding turn 13. And I think Massa's getting the hammer down because he's extended the gap over Mark Webber. It's now 6.9 seconds. Let's see what the gap is as they cross the line to end lap 37 and start lap 38. 6.9 at the moment. Barrichello just 1.2 behind. And Jenson Button at 10 seconds behind these two. So once these two make their second stops, then Jenson will be regaining those positions off of him. In fact, one of them has come into the pits. It is Rubens Barrichello. So there's Lewis Hamilton in 5th position, driving very well. Got Sebastian Vettel behind. But Vettel does have another stop to make. Hamilton can go to the end. Now let's see, there goes Jenson Button, and here goes Lewis Hamilton. So Hamilton moves up to 4th position now. And I'm expecting when Massa and Webber make their pit stops, it's going to be Button from Hamilton. But who's going to be third? That's going to be an interesting one to find out. As Wirtz is about to go a lap down on Felipe Massa, and not doing a very good job of it, sticking to the inside through turn 7, but Massa gains a lap over Alexander Wirtz. Now Webber goes through turn 7. How much time will Webber have gained over Massa in that little bit? Because that wasn't an ideal place to try and lap somebody for Massa. So at the moment it looks like 7.7. What's the gap as they cross the second sector point? Well, we switched the timing graphics. But it does look as if Massa has the quicker car compared to Webber. Just overall. In fact, it's still 7.7 seconds between Massa and Webber, so didn't lose too much time, as much as I thought for Massa. In fact, they were a little bit even. But rounding the long right of turn 13, that's Jenson Button. Currently in 3rd place, but due to retake the lead once Massa and Webber make their second pit stops. On board with Webber, you can see the rain still coming down. As through the final corner goes Webber to start another lap. Massa go through for another lap. He did, yes. And the gap has gone up to 8.1 seconds. So Webber not exactly quick at this stage of the race. And I'm just trying to work out when he made his pit stop. I can't quite remember at this stage, but Massa definitely made his first pit stop later than Webber, so that's why he's able to pull out a gap over the Australian. as Adrian Sutil makes a pit stop from 9th place, so he'll briefly drop down the order. He'll lose that position to Rubens Barrichello and to Kimi Räikkönen. Once again, Sutil not driving too badly for Spiker. As we continue to look at Massa, but now we switch to Jenson Button, who is closing in on his teammate Mark Webber for 2nd position, but Button has stopped. Webber still has another stop to make. That's Montoya versus Hulkenberg for 7th position. And Montoya has made his 2nd pit stop, so a little bit heavier on fuel compared to the Super Aguri. As Trulli also makes a pit stop as well. That's Massa onto the back straight, underneath the Petronas banner, the Olympus banner, and the brake marker boards, and turn into the final hairpin. Looked like he hit the apex okay, but coming out of the hairpin and into the final corner, which is a sharp right, but Massa's going to go into the pits. So into the pits for his 2nd stop goes Felipe Massa. So that should put Mark Webber briefly back into the lead, although Jenson Button, he's only a 2nd behind Webber now, so Button much quicker at this stage of the race compared to Webber, who has a 2nd pit stop to make. Alexander Wurz is in the pits as well, but we're looking at Sebastian Vettel, who goes round for another lap, so that will be a position gained for Vettel, should be, over Felipe Massa. Hamilton up to 3rd now, so he's in the podium place now thanks to that one-stop strategy. And it should become 2nd once Mark Webber comes into the pits. But for the moment, Webber takes the lead of the race. And Massa losing a place to Alonso as well. That's 5th place Alonso now. But Vettel and Alonso do have pit stops to make. So going into turn 6 goes Sebastian Vettel. It's 3.2 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton. There is Lewis Hamilton as we switch to Timo Glock, looking from the back of his Red Bull. That's going through turns 9 and 10. I can see Matthias Lauda in the pits as well from the timing screen. But we're going on board with Timo Glock at the moment. You can see Lauda dropping positions as he is in the pits. Now we switch to Mark Webber, race leader. When is he going to come into the pits? And when he does come into the pits, where will he rejoin? Because he needs to maximise as many points as possible with Sato's retirement. It will go down to the final race no matter what happens. The gap is 20 points. Well, it was 20 points as they came into this meeting. And with 25 on offer for a win, and with Sato out, there will be a championship showdown once again. So there's Jenson Button coming through the final corner. I think in front is Mark Webber, who went round for another tour. So Webber still carrying on at this moment. And in fact, I'm a bit confused by the gaps, because it did look at one point as if Button was catching up to Webber. Maybe I'd got the gaps wrong. Maybe I was looking at the intervals between the drivers and not the leader. Webber is 9 seconds ahead of Jenson Button at this stage. And he's rounding turn 7 at the moment. Now through turn 8. And then a short squirt before turn 9 and 10. Choosing to not go to the outside, going into turn number 9. There's a little bit more grip on the inside on this wet surface. Jenson Button doing the same thing. Just nudging the white line, but then clambering all over the AstroTurf at the exit. Short straight before turn 11. Watch him turn in here. Kiss the apex, stick to the left before turning into the right. Missing the apex a little bit there was Button. And rounding turn 13. There's 3rd place Lewis Hamilton. Should reiterate, he started 16th on the grid, And using a one-stop strategy, he's up to third place at the moment, but it should become second once Mark Webber makes his second pit stop. And I should reiterate as well, a superb performance from 16th on the grid. And that will definitely move Super Aguri ahead of Renault if Hamilton stays where he is. But still got a bit of distance to go. We've got one more quarter to go now, because we're starting lap 42. And a new fastest lap for Jenson Button, a 153.340, as he closes in a little bit on Mark Webber, the race leader, yet to make his second pit stop. Back into the pits comes Timo Glock, so that's his third pit stop of the race. And Hulkenberg making his second pit stop as well from 8th position. So he'll lose a few positions temporarily. Although, being that there's only one more quarter to go, these positions are becoming a bit truer. And I think that's Mark Webber about to lap one of the Renaults. Try and see which one that is. It's Kubica, who's sitting in 15th position at the moment, and neither Renault looks as if they're going to score points, although Ricciardo's moved up to 11th position now, thanks to the pit stop sequences. There you can see third place Hamilton. He's 17 seconds off of the race lead, and I'm safe to assume that Vettel and Alonso have got second pit stops to make, so the true battle now for third position, or what should be second position, should be between Hamilton and Massa. Massa 6th place, and he's got 8 seconds to gain over Lewis Hamilton. That's doable in 14 laps. I think this is Rubens Barrichello we were on board with, but we switched out boards to see Adrian Sutil. Looks like he got quite a lot of understeer going into turn 6, so trying to increase his front grip somewhat by wrenching the wheel to the right in order to generate some front tyre temperature. Sutil currently running in 12th place at the moment. I think Ricciardo does have another stop to make. So he's on for probably in 11th place is Adrian Sutil. Could be a bit more if somebody has some problems. I just saw Vettel into the pits, so he's going to be dropping down the order briefly. Where can he rejoin with his second pit stop, which will be a bit shorter compared to others? I think the target is to get out ahead of Kimi Raikkonen for 8th position. Now, which McLaren are we looking at there? I think that is Kimi Raikkonen, and that is Vettel just leaving the pits. That's Matthias Lauda having a spin, and who's going to hit him? No one's hitting him so far. That has delayed Mark Webber a little bit. Now, that was a spin going through turn 8. And he's going to delay Jenson Button around the outside. But Jenson puts that lap on the Austrian. And Mark Webber's tucked up behind Kubica. And this is not what the Australian needs. There's Hamilton in 3rd position. And Ricciardo is into the pits, so they have to make that second pit stop, so that will move Sutil up a position. Should move Trulli up a position as well, but Ricciardo's not done too badly in this middle stint. There's Kimi Raikkonen in 8th, and Vettel rejoined in 9th, so he's jumped Nico Hulkenberg, and Ferrari looking on course to score some points. Some useful points that will increase the gap between themselves and BMW Sauber for 8th place in the Constructors. Webber's in the pits. Mark Webber is into the pits for his second pit stop. And where's he going to rejoin as Sebastian Vettel? Just as I said, Sebastian Vettel was on course for points. I think it was a mistake coming out of turn 10. Got a bit too wide on the AstroTurf. And he's lost some time. But it's okay. Nico Hulkenberg is still 2.7 seconds behind. So that was very nearly the commentator's curse that I put on Sebastian Vettel. Luckily for Vettel, he's still carrying on. So Jenson Button is now back into the lead of the race, after what was a very good middle stint for himself. Hamilton is now up to 2nd, Massa 3rd, Montoya 4th, and Webber has rejoined in 5th place ahead of Rubens Barrichello. So a 5th place would give him 10 points, and that will halve the gap between himself and Takuma Sato in the championship, if it stays like this. We're just seeing Alonso, having made a pit stop as well, has rejoined behind Kimi Räikkönen, and he might rejoin ahead of Vettel. I think he has done, so that is 8th place for Fernando Alonso, as we look at Massa versus the McLaren of Montoya. That was coming through the fast sweepers of 7 and 8. Now into the slightly slower section of turn 9. That's Timo Glock about to go a lap down on Alonso, who is in 8th position. That's ahead of Sebastian Vettel. Seen quite a lot of Glock. Slightly unsure as to why he's not really in the race. But airtime is airtime, I suppose. But there's your race leader. That's Jenson Button. Now, how big is his buffer over Lewis Hamilton? It was more than 10 seconds last time I checked. There's Jenson Button. Is he going to make a pit stop? Jenson Button coming into the pits once again. So, well, he did have to make another pit stop. That's going to put Lewis Hamilton into the lead of the race. So this is unexpected. Why is Jenson Button making a pit stop this late of the race? Is that Hamilton going to take the lead of the race? Yes, it was. Lewis Hamilton takes the lead of the race. Incredible. Is that going to put Felipe Massa up into 2nd position? Let's see what happens as he... Yeah, 2nd place for Massa, 3rd place for Montoya. I think Jenson Button, can he rejoin still ahead of Mark Webber? That is the question. As we are on board with the race leader, Lewis Hamilton, and Webber's jumped Button as well. So that's going to help the Australian, so 2 more points for himself. That will move into 8 points behind Takuma Sato in the championship. There's still 12 laps to go, and anything can happen. And this is now the battle for 2nd between Massa and Montoya. And Montoya looks as if he wants that position off of his South African compatriot. Not quite the same country. Montoya is Colombian, Massa is Brazilian. And both will receive quite a reception actually at Interlagos. There's a bit of a Latin contingency going on there. We've got Rubens Barrichello in there as well, and in fact the Williams team do have a Brazilian test driver, Cristiano da Mata. And they had an Argentine race for them as well, Jose Maria Lopez, who did get dropped mid-season in the favour of Massa. So there is Lewis Hamilton, race leader for the Super Aguri team. What is the gap between himself and Felipe Massa? And in fact, Massa is involved in that battle with Montoya. So if they keep battling, this is looking really, really good for Lewis Hamilton to take his first win of the season. Super Aguri's first win of the season as well. Still 12 laps to go as Vettel... That's putting a lap on Timo Glock actually. Oh, Massa getting all sorts of sideways coming out of the final corner. And there goes Montoya into 2nd position, goes the Colombian. Now, it did look as if Montoya was the quicker of the 2 drivers. Now, can he do something about race leader Hamilton on that one-stop strategy? Let's keep an eye out on the gaps. But there's Hamilton going through the kink of 5, and Montoya was about in turn 3. It's 12 seconds, the gap between Hamilton and Montoya. So Montoya needs a demon final stint if he's going to win this race. At the moment, we are on board with one of the Red Bulls. And, oof, now was that Alonso or was that Glock having a slow exit? I think it might have been Glock, but I think Alonso might have been delayed by that as well. Because Hulkenberg is ahead and has gained a position at the expense of the Red Bull. So Alonso's final stint not going to plan. As we watch Montoya, Massa's not given up on Montoya. And this is looking even better for Hamilton if these two start battling once again. And Massa gains 7/10 in that middle sector. So I think Montoya must have made some sort of mistake somewhere. Because that is a big chunk of time lost. Yeah, and he lost 6/10 to Hamilton as well on that lap, so Montoya getting a bit out of shape somewhere, probably going through turns 7 and 8, and now Massa is trying to get up alongside the McLaren Mercedes of Montoya, going into the final hairpin, all on the brakes and on the outside line. Massa on the inside, but Montoya braving it round the outside. He wants that second place. And there is 4th place Mark Webber. Ahead of Jenson Button, having... Well, Jenson made that pit stop. That 3rd stop of the race, fairly inexplicably, so... Yeah, I'm not too sure. Oh, somebody's off the circuit. That is Button, actually, off the circuit at the final corner. So Rubens Barrichello has taken that position off of the Toyota, so treacherously wet conditions, and it's catching out drivers hand over fist. Looks as if it's getting even wetter as well. Alonso and Massa's retaken second off of Montoya somewhere, so Massa now back up to second. He's still 12.2 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton, so I can't imagine that they'll be closing in on the Super Aguri driver. Yeah, raining cats and dogs in Shanghai. Raikkonen also got ahead of Jenson Button as well, so a very costly error for the Brit. Now down to 7th position. And Raikkonen's only 1.2 seconds behind Barrichello as well, as he's going to go off the circuit. Raikkonen well off the circuit. Now is that going to put Jenson Button back up a position? I don't think so. Still behind Raikkonen, but a lot closer. So yeah, the track's getting very, very slippery at this latter stage of the race. With 10 laps to go, more drivers are making mistakes, so it's definitely getting wetter out there, or maybe the tyres are wearing out. It doesn't seem to be bothering Hamilton, who's pulling out the gap between himself and Massa. It's now 12.5 seconds, and Montoya just 7/10 behind Massa as we go down the back straight. Hard on the brakes for the final hairpin, but not too hard, because locking up in the wet is absolutely hazardous. And Jenson's just 4/10 behind Raikkonen as we switch to Lewis Hamilton. He's got Matthias Lauda in front of him, but other than that, fairly lonely out at the front. 12.5 seconds. Jenson Button versus Raikkonen, and Jenson Button getting a lot of understeer on the entry to the final corner and getting bad traction coming out of the final corner. So 2 laps in a row, Jenson has made a mistake at the final corner. So his new wet tyres and this final load of fuel is not working out very well for him. But still a good race for Toyota. With Montoya 3rd, that's 15 points, and Raikkonen 6th, that is 8 points. That's a potential 23 points for McLaren, and that alone is not, I don't believe, is enough to be within championship contention of Toyota in the final race, no matter what Toyota do here. So McLaren need a little bit more if they're going to remain in championship contention, and I'm not too sure if they're going to manage it. We are on board with a Ferrari. It's Sebastian Vettel in 8th place. Only 3/10 ahead of Nico Hülkenberg, so Hülkenberg's got some pace in this final stint. Now we switch back to Montoya. The battling Massa and Montoya coming out of turn 13. Massa's got a bit more of an edge over Montoya now. And Jenson Button having a big lock-up going into turn 11, so he's struggling out there. Struggling on his final set of tyres. But he's comfortable ahead of Vettel. So McLaren 15 points plus another 8, as Ricciardo has taken a position off of Trulli, but they're battling hard. Trulli retake that position from Ricciardo, as Adrian Sutil tries to put a lap on the block, but the block is still being a bit of a mobile chicane. As we go on board with Kubica for a bit, let's see him clunk the curbs at 6, right on cue. Exiting turn 6 underneath the Bridgestone banner. And Raikkonen, what's he doing? He's showing red on the marker. Is he making a pit stop? I think he is. Kimi Raikkonen making yet another pit stop. So that's going to move Jenson Button up a position and help Toyota's challenge in the championship. I think they're probably going to win the Constructors in this race, but the Drivers' Championship will go down to the final race. Let's see what happens in the final 8 laps as we look now at Felipe Massa going through 7. He's definitely pulling away now from Montoya. So Massa having a good race in the wet. Even despite a lurid spin at one point at coming out of turn 7. And he's just 10 seconds behind Hamilton now, so Massa, now that he's got clear of Montoya, he's really put the hammer down. Hülkenberg versus Vettel. This is now for 7th position actually, because of Kimi Raikkonen's late pit stop, which has dropped him down to 10th place. Just about in front of Adrian Sutil as well, so Kimi Raikkonen quite fortunate to still be in the points. But there's your race leader, Lewis Hamilton, who has now put that lap on Matthias Lauda. But he has got Felipe Massa closing in on him, so Hamilton's got to keep the pace up if he's going to be comfortable out in the lead. Still a comfortable gap, but Massa is on the charge. Through turn 1. Let's see the gap between Hamilton and Massa, crossing the line. You can see the number of pit stops people have made. Button's made 3. And Hülkenberg's taken Vettel on track somewhere, so he's up to 7th place now, ahead of the Ferrari driver. So that German battle briefly resolved in favour of Hülkenberg, but it could still go elsewhere in the final stages if more incidents happen. So Raikkonen has made 3 stops, so that kind of makes sense. As Ricciardo has a look at Trulli for 12th, and look at that understeer for Kimi Raikkonen, just not turning in at all, and is that going to put Sutil up a position? Well, there's Glock getting past, but yes, Sutil's taken Raikkonen for 10th position, so again, new tyres are just not really working on these cars in these late stages, because we've seen Jensen struggle, and now we're seeing Kimi Raikkonen do the same thing. Or maybe Kimi got a bit of a nudge. We didn't see the outboard shot of it, we just went on board just as Raikkonen was hacksawing away at the wheel. You can see Montoya versus Webber. Montoya looked like he missed the apex by quite a bit. And the gap extending between Massa and Montoya to 2.1 seconds. So Webber's not too far behind Montoya, so if he gets a spurt on, and there is Webber coming out turn 13, then Webber could take another bit of more of a chunk out of Sato's championship lead. Massa breaking into the hairpin. Hits the apex quite well as he continues to try and close in on race leader Lewis Hamilton. And this battle between Trulli and Ricciardo is still going on for 12th position. That's going to go on till the end of the race. The Ferrari's very quick in a straight line. The Renault, based off of the evidence from the previous race, doesn't have great power, but it's got some plucky drivers as Hülkenberg puts a lap on Alexander Wurz. Going down the back straight, Hülkenberg up in 7th, and with Hamilton in the lead, that's good points for Super Aguri if it stays like this. Again, good races from both, but particularly Hamilton. But Massa is still closing, it's 7.6 seconds as they cross the first sector point. Massa might need a little bit more if he's going to win this race. But Jenson Button, going through turns 3 and 4, sits in 6th position at the moment, looks as if he's calmed down a bit on his new set of wets. And how far is he behind Barrichello? 7 and a bit seconds behind Rubens Barrichello, so it's a comfortable 6th for Jenson Button. And if it stays like this, it'll be a very good race for Williams, actually. As Ricciardo versus Trulli was the contact. I'm not sure if there was. It might have been the gentlest kiss. And Trulli holds on for the moment. Yeah, it'll be a good race for Williams, actually, with Massa up in 2nd and Barrichello 5th, especially after their very, very bad run of reliability. Be a welcome fillip for both Massa and Barrichello. And Alonso zooms up the inside of somebody. I think that was to put a lap on somebody. Probably Alexander Wurz. Let's see as he turns through turns 9 and 10. But yeah, it looked a bit sudden. And Alonso sits in 9th place at the moment, 1 and a bit seconds behind Sebastian Vettel. 5 laps remaining. The gap between Massa and Hamilton was 7.2 seconds, could be a little bit less than that now. Ricciardo has taken Trulli on this lap somewhere, so Ricciardo up to 12th position, and the gap between Hamilton and Massa, 7 seconds. Here we are on board with Trulli, I believe, going through turn number 8, now into turns 9 and 10. Having just lost that position to Daniel Ricciardo somewhere in the middle sector, I think. 6.4 seconds, the gap between Hamilton and Massa. Massa needs to gain about 1.5 seconds a lap if he's going to be within striking distance of Lewis Hamilton with 2 or so laps to go. So Massa needs just a little bit more to try and catch Lewis Hamilton and deprive the Super Aguri of an unbelievable win. And Massa's about to put a lap on Matthias Lauda. And the gap's still going down a little bit more. And Lauda not doing a very good job of getting out of the way. That's going to help Hamilton. That's going to help Hamilton maintain the buffer over himself and Felipe Massa. Because Matthias Lauda being a bit of a pain now in the slipstream. And Lauda surely going to move out of the way. Once Massa can get close enough, he's got a good engine behind him. But no, Lauda doesn't seem very compliant. And that's 3rd place Montoya we're looking at. Going through the hairpin. Soon it'll be 4 laps to go. And 1 less lap for Hamilton to deal with. 4 laps to go now. That's the gap between himself and Massa as they cross the line. I think Massa's still behind Lauda at this point. It's gone up to 6.8 seconds, so Lauda really costing Massa dearly. As Robert Kubica in 14th place, on his own a little bit, but just 4.6 seconds behind Jarno Trulli. So can he do something about the Italian in the closing stages? Maybe, maybe not. There goes Trulli. There you can see the gainers and losers, and that tells it all. P1 having gained 16 places. Massa having gained 1 at the expense of Montoya. Webber up 3, so decent race from 7th on the grid for the Australian. And with Sato out, that's an added bonus. You can see Raikkonen down 10. Very poor race from himself. Wrong strategy, generally not that quick, because even in that first stint, Raikkonen was holding up a lot of cars. So probably was expecting the track to dry out somewhat, and maybe had a drier setup. There's Vettel in 8th place. And he's fairly lonely in 8th place now, so Hülkenberg's pulled away, but he's still got a comfortable enough buffer over Alonso. Although Alonso is catching up, he's just 2 seconds behind the German going through the first sector point. As Vettel goes through turn 7, and out of the race goes Wirtz. That looks like an engine failure, judging by the smoke coming out of the back of the Toro Rosso. So I think he's pulled off at about turn 3. So as he gets pushed away, indeed it's an engine failure for the Austrians, so both Toro Rossos failing to make the finish. Rosberg out on the very first lap due to a multi-car pile-up at turn 6 involving both the Renaults, Perez, and looked like the Spikers as well, but only 1 retirement from that. So 3 laps to go now. Massa is 5.4 seconds behind Hamilton, needs to be 2 seconds a lap quicker in the closing stages. Not sure if that's doable, so he may have to settle for 2nd. But still a good result for Brazilian Felipe Massa. Joined mid-season, replacing Jose Maria Lopez. Won on his first race back. Had a few more points finishes since then, but then the team boss disappeared. And then a poor run of reliability for both Williamses. But now Massa looks as if he's back in form, back in the points. Back on the podium, actually. Hasn't given up on Hamilton just yet. It's 4.9 seconds the gap as they cross the first sector point. Massa needs more though. But there is Hamilton. We've switched to Lauda, who's holding up Montoya. Montoya's not had a good time with the back markers in this race. first Glock. And was that Webber going past? Webber taking a position off of Montoya. So that is key for the championship, because that means that Webber will score 3 more points than expected. And that would move him to within 5 points of Takuma Sato going into the final race. So that was a crucial moment for Montoya, and once again, a back marker caused it. Switch back to Felipe Massa now going into the final corner. And what is the gap now between himself and Lewis Hamilton? Well, there was Hamilton going into the final corner. He'll be starting his penultimate lap. Turning in goes Massa. So Hamilton starts his penultimate lap now. And Massa, it was 4.5 as they crossed the sector 2 point. And going around the first few corners, here comes Hamilton. And there is Rubens Barrichello in 5th position, understeering into the final corner. He'll get a slow exit. But still in 5th position, which will be good points for Williams. But there's Jenson Button. He's not too far behind. And that was basically half the gap that Button took out of Barrichello in that final sector. All down to that mistake at the final corner. So it's 3.8 seconds now, the gap between Hamilton and Massa as we go into the middle sector. And Hamilton just needs to keep it on the road. Don't make any mistakes and you've got your first victory of the season. Through the tricky 9 and 10. Just about keeping 2 wheels within the track limits. And that's okay. But Massa still closing. No brake lockups. And turning absolutely fine. Here's Timo Glock about to run wide at turn 1. How wide is he going to go? Just about on the circuit still, and still riding it around the outside. But now you've got the inside for turns 3, and then sweep out to the outside for turn 4, and you live to see another lap. And that's 3rd place Mark Webber we're looking at there. About to put a lap on Matthias Lauda, who cost Montoya. Is he going to do the same thing to Mark Webber? Well, Tobias will be hoping that Lauda won't be doing such a thing. But we go into the final lap now. It is still Hamilton in the lead. Starting his final lap, and Massa going through the first corner. You could just see in front there. Webber needs to clear Matthias Lauda, who's not made it easy for anyone. Through turns 3 and 4, Massa now less than 3 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton. Needs an absolutely barnstorming final lap to get close to Hamilton, but looks as if Lewis has got the measure. As Webber tries to put that lap on Lauda, who was pretty much frightened off the road, but now he's finally done that. Webber clear of Montoya, and that should be a 3rd place for the Australian driver. And with that 3rd place as well, Toyota will probably take the Constructors' Championship as Trulli defends 13th place off of Robert Kubica going through turns 12 and 13. Round they go. Kubica looking to make a move on Jarno Trulli. But we would like to see Lewis Hamilton because he should be nearing the end of the lap now. These two aren't a lap down, so Hamilton is somewhere behind these two. And Kubica failing to make an overtake work on Trulli, so Trulli holds on to 13th place. Keep an eye further back because and there goes Trulli off the circuit, and Kubica gains that place thanks to a mistake from the Ferrari driver. But let's look further back. There's Hamilton, there's Massa. It is still close, but only one more corner to go. And to take an amazing win from 16th on the grid, his first of the season, Superga's first of the season, it is Lewis Hamilton who wins the Chinese Grand Prix from Felipe Massa. The gap was just 1.3 seconds in the end. A good race, a good charge from Massa, but not enough to overhaul Hamilton. There's 3rd place Mark Webber, could be one of the most important 3rd places of his career because that moves him to within 5 points of Takuma Sato. Montoya 4th, Barrichello 5th. And behind Barrichello is Montoya. No, it's not. It's Jenson Button. What am I on about? And that 3rd and 6th place, that will seal the Constructors' Championship for Toyota. So, well done Tobias, well done Toyota. Drivers' Championship not quite finished yet. That's Nico Hülkenberg, and he is going to finish his race, and he's going to finish in 7th. Another good, solid drive for Hülkenberg, but the story of the race, undoubtedly his own teammate, winning from 16th on the grid with a brilliant strategy, just the one stop, and that's what's helped Hamilton win. And just seeing the final runners, Suttle takes 10th ahead of a pretty dispirited Kimi Räikkönen, I have to say. Just the wrong strategy and not very quick in the race anyway, finishing from pole position down in 11th. And completing it all, that's Timo Glock. Stone dead last. Still got some left to go. This will be Daniel Ricciardo finishing 12th. Renault without points. And Superguri's win in 7th will move them ahead of Renault in the championship. Kubica 13th, and then the final one on the lead lap is Jarno Trulli. Good race to watch, good challenging race in the wet conditions. It was very close earlier on, and certainly wasn't expecting a Hamilton win, but superior strategy from Superaguri. And we have a championship showdown at Interlagos between Sato and Webber. Just 5 points separating the two. Who will win the race and who will win that championship? Stay tuned and see you soon.